Okay. Let us summarize what we discussed in last two classes. We discussed a lot of fundamental things along with some advanced topics also. Sound is good.
Yes, Neeraj.
Okay. So we talked about transaction concurrency control mechanism implemented in SQL Server. And we started our discussion with log types. SQL Server uh, achieves control of concurrent transactions to make your transaction consistent by implementing three kinds of locks. Although SQL Server implements 32 kinds of locks that we are not going to discuss, we will basically discuss about three, four kinds of locks. Major ones are shared lock, which is used for read operations. Read operation is only you have only select a statement there in T-SQL. That is your read operation. So all read operations require a shared lock to be occupied on the resource on which from which they have to read the data. So your resource could be a single row. Your resource could be a range of rows. Your resource could be a database page or multiple pages. Your resource could be extents. Your resource could be finally table. And on higher level, your resource could be a schema and then the database, right? So these are your resources. When I say that transactions acquire locks on resources, so these are the resources, right? And this is necessary to make your transaction and database and the data consistent, right? So any transaction may require any of these three kinds of locks. Shared lock in SQL Server is represented by S. Exclusive lock is represented by, shared lock is represented by S. Exclusive lock is represented by X, and update lock is represented by U, right? Shared lock is occupied by your transactions which are read in nature. You have only one statement in T-SQL, that is select statement, which require shared lock to be occupied on the resource. When I say resource, I let me repeat it again. Your resource could be a single row, a range of rows, uh, a data page or multiple pages, or an extent, or a table, or a schema, or a database itself, right? So select operation, all select operation or select transactions need to acquire a shared lock on the resource before they read the data from there. This is necessary to make your transaction and data consistent. Then when you perform any kind of write operation, modify operation, right? So an update lock is required to be taken on the resource by the transaction. So in case of your insert and delete a statement, update lock is acquired. In case of update a statement, which is also your write operation, right, which modifies the data, update lock is acquired, and followed by an exclusive lock. So update, delete, and insert operation also require exclusive lock. By using these three kinds of locks, SQL Server implements transaction concurrency control within the database engine, right? If locks are not there, then concurrent transactions cannot be controlled. What does it mean? That any transaction can access the same data, try to access the same data, which is already being operated by any other transaction. And finally, that will make a conflicted situation that which data should persist, right? So that's why locks are implemented. Now, I also discussed about isolation level. Isolation level basically defines the degree of concurrency for the transactions, on which degree concurrent transactions will execute in your system. So basically, we have 5 isolation levels available in SQL Server. These top four isolation levels, starting from lowest to highest, read uncommitted will come first. Let me change the sequence here. First, read uncommitted will come here. If we talk about lowest to highest degree of isolation, then read committed, read uncommitted, read committed, repeatable read, and serializable. I talked about these 4 isolation level also, that how they deal with different kinds of anomalies, database anomalies that may exist during the transactions, right? So I told you that read committed, if you execute any transaction under read uncommitted isolation level, it may introduce the problem of dirty reads. You may see the problem of phantom reads and unrepeatable reads also under the read uncommitted isolation level. So this is the lowest isolation level you have. With the lowest isolation level, you have less overheads of locks in SQL Server. Every lock is a memory object and it occupies 64 kilobyte in memory. So if anybody asks that what is the lock, the simple answer is lock is a memory object which occupies 64 KB in memory, right? So if you run any transaction under read uncommitted isolation level, there will be less locks occupied on the resource in comparison to if you run same transaction under read committed isolation level. So top 4 isolation level comes under optimistic approach of concurrency control for transactions. Pessimistic approach of concurrency control for transactions. These top 4. These two that you see here, a snapshot and read committed snapshot, are not different isolation level. Rather, you can think that these are the same isolation level, a snapshot isolation level, right? There is a slight difference. We will talk about that. A snapshot and read committed snapshot isolation level. So basically, read committed snapshot is a version of a snapshot isolation level. The concept is a snapshot here. A snapshot isolation level works on the principle of optimistic concurrency control mechanism, right? So basically, you have 5 isolation levels available. Earlier, before 2005, you had only 4 isolation level. Those worked with pessimistic approach of concurrency control. When I say pessimistic approach of concurrency control, it means that under these isolation level, SQL Server thinks that whatever transactions you are executing, something may go wrong. So that's why under precaution, it takes relevant locks on the resource first, right? But under the snapshot isolation level, locks are list implemented. Only a schema lock is applied, right? Not your row level lock, not your page level lock, not your table level lock. These kinds of locks are not implemented. A schema lock is rather implemented, and it works on a technology that is known as row versioning, where row versioning works on a principle of copy on write technology. So I will also talk about that. These are the different isolation level you have. So isolation level defines the degree of uh, execution of transactions, that how much they will execute in isolated fashion, right? I also discussed that when you run a transaction under read committed, it will eliminate dirty reads problem or the database anomaly, that is dirty reads from the transactions. If you run your transaction under repeatable read isolation level, the non-repeatable reads anomaly will be gone. That will be eliminated. What is non-repeatable reads anomaly? And what is dirty reads and phantom reads anomalies? What are these? I already have discussed. You can go through the videos, or if you have gone through class recording, right? That is fine. If not, please go through that. I'm not going to repeat that. So these are the things we talked in our last two classes, perhaps, right? Let us go ahead. We also talked about ACID properties and how they are implemented in SQL Server. So there in the last, I was talking about database recovery phases, right? Why I started to talk this, because I was talking about durability, the D in ACID, durability, right? How SQL Server achieves durability. What is durability? I already have explained, but for now, I would only say durability ensures that uh, even in case of database engine crash, your database inside the data and transactions inside SQL Server must remain in the same state as it were at the time of engine crash. So for that, SQL Server implements database recovery technique, which consists of three phases. Those phases are analysis, redo, and undo. Redo is also known as roll forward, and undo is also known as roll back. You know that SQL Server works on a principle that is known as write-ahead logging. So whenever you perform a transaction, that transaction is first written into log cache. Log cache is the memory area, which is different than SQL buffer. Like you have plan cache, you have log cache also. So first the transaction is written into log cache. Immediately after that, transaction is written into your transaction log file. And your transaction log file is divided into multiple VLFs logically, where each VLF has three states. Perhaps I have not discussed, that is not part of performance tuning, but yet I'm going to discuss about that. So each of the VLFs may be in any of these three states. The first state is free. The second state is active. The third state is your that is known as recoverable. The first state is free, then active, then recoverable, and then reusable. What I'm talking, are you getting? This is very important to understand. So let me show you. It must be somewhere. What I was talking, log architecture, right? Are you all clear with this state of the VLFs? If not, I will have to discuss. Why say yes or no?
Yeah, can you explain it again? VLF.
Let me come. Must be there. Okay, let me search it. If it is not here, it must be somewhere. D2. Oh, just have a look. Is it here? Transaction log info. No, these are commands. Actually, I want to show you. That's why I'm searching it. Otherwise, I'm fine to explain. Let us go back. Come to class 1. Do we have here? Transaction log questions. VLF states. Yes, it's here. So you know that your transaction log file is a physical file which exists on disk. When I say physical file, any file which is on disk, your database consists of two physical files. One is your MDF, at least two files. One is your MDF and another is your transaction log file, right? So these two are the files which reside on disk. That's why they are known as physical files. So if anyone asks you that how many physical files you have in a database, the answer is a straight forward that we have only two. Basically, we have only two physical files in each of the database. right? One is MDF, that is used to store data along with the metadata of database. And the second is your what? The second is your uh, transaction log file with an extension LDF, right? So your LDF, transaction log file, is divided into, logically divided into multiple virtual log files, right? They are known as VLFs in short. So for example, if I have a log file of say 10 GB, then that 10 GB VLF will be divided into 10 GB log file will be divided into multiple VLFs, right? That you can check here using the command. Let me show you what I'm talking. For example, let us change the database context to AdventureBox and check for the VLFs, how many VLFs we have. What is the command for that? dbcc loginfo is the simple command that you can use. Loginfo. Why it is showing error? So how many rows you see? 1172 rows you see here. These are your VLFs, right? And it shows the VLF status here, either 2, or for some you may see 0. It shows only 2 states, 0 or 2. What does it mean? I am coming to this, right? So now come back here. Your VLF, your transaction log file is divided into multiple VLFs, right? VLFs are logical structure. The objective behind dividing a physical file into multiple VLFs is to make the transaction log file space reusable, right? So that is why when you take transaction log backup of a database, when your database is in full recovery model, right? What happens actually when you take the transaction log file, the VLF state changed. When the VLF state is changed, right, then only you will see, you see that the transaction log space is free, is free now. So what are those states that we have to understand? First of all, any VLF is in free state, right? Is it shown here? Not shown. Okay, not a problem. Unused or free. That is the first state of any VLF. It means that no transaction is yet written in this VLF. When any transaction is written into VLF and that transaction is executing, the state of the VLF is changed and it becomes active, right? Now, when when the transaction is completed, right, then the VLF state is changed from active to recoverable. Now, when you take the transaction log backup, if your database is in full recovery model, right, then the VLF state is changed from recoverable to reusable. This is a L3 level question asked in interviews, especially for DBAs, that what are the different states of a VLF? First, they will ask that what is VLF? And then they will ask you the question that what are the different states of VLF, right? So these are the states. The first state is unused or free. It means that no transaction has yet been written, right, into that VLF. It means that that is unused or free. When a transaction is written in VLF and then transaction is running, the VLF state is changed from unused to active. When that transaction is completed, right, so it becomes recoverable. And when you take transaction log backup, right, the state of the VLF from recoverable becomes reusable. So when it becomes reusable, it means that another transaction can be written into that VLF. So the objective behind these states of VLF is to make the transaction log file space reusable. That's why when your transaction log backup against a database which is in full recovery mode is failing, you will see your transaction log is filling at a larger speed, right? So when you see your transaction log is filled completely, right, then your first task is what? Usually you go to check full transaction log backup. But before taking transaction log backup, you should check the VLF states using the log info, DBCC log info command, right? So these are the many VLFs. 1,172 VLFs are there in this database, AdventureWorks 2016. Many of the VLF states are here, status are here in status 2. What does it mean? If your status is 2, it means that either they are active or recoverable or they are active. They are either in active state or in recoverable state. They are not still in reusable state. Whenever you see the status 0, started 0 means either it is free or it is in reusable state. So you always love to see your maximum VLF should be in status 0. They should be either in free state or in reusable state. You all are getting what I'm saying? Any question here? No question, right? So let us come back. If you understood this, it's good thing. I was talking about what I was talking. I was talking about database recovery, right? So now you come to know that all transactions that you perform are first written into transaction log cache. After that, SQL Server writes the transaction into your transaction log file. And in transaction log file, that transaction is written in VLFs. Uh, in one VLF, multiple transaction can be written. Note it down. It not like that. Only one transaction is written into one VLF. Multiple transactions can be written into one VLF. So until and unless all transactions are not completed and your log backup is not taken, they will not come into reusable state, right? So your transaction log file has the information of all the transactions which are performed or being performed, right? Which have completed or being completed. What happens actually when your database engine crashes, right? Or when you restart your database engine deliberately, manually, in that case, SQL Server databases, whatever databases are hosted, each of the database will have to go under database recovery phases. That's why you see the state of your database sometimes in recovery or recovering. So while it is recovering, while SQL Server is recovering databases, every database goes through these 3 phases: analysis, redo, and undo. During the analysis phase, transaction log file is read or analyzed, and after that, it creates 2 tables. These tables are in memory structure. The first is your DPT, dirty page table. Make it simple, which contains information of all the pages which have been modified and committed as well. But the resultant data of that transaction has not yet been hardened to the data file on the disk, right? So that refers to your DPT table, dirty page table. Another table is created during this process of analysis is ATT, active transaction table, which contains information of dirty pages, which have been modified in memory, but not yet committed. So the ask is simple here for the next 2 phases. Those transactions which have been, uh, uh, which are related to those data pages, which have been modified and committed as well, but not yet hardened to disk, that have their resultant data, has to be written on the disk. That's why they follow the process of redo or roll forward, right? And those transactions which were in active state, it means that they have not yet been committed. Although they have modified some data pages, those have to be rolled back or undone. So they follow the process either known as undone or roll back. So redo or roll forward are synonym to each other. Undo or roll back are synonym to each other. Both have same meaning. Redo and roll forward are the same term used for same sense or same meaning, and undo or roll back has the same meaning. So these are the three phases under which each and every database has to go whenever your database engine restarts. These phases are not followed, or your database will not go uh, only will not go under database recovery phases in case of database engine restarts, but also if your databases are parts of any high availability technologies. In that case also, whenever a failover occurs, right, at that time also, your secondary databases have to go under these three phases before they come online. So that's why when a failover occurs during database mirroring, when they are when databases are configured under synchronous mode of commit, in that case also, before the mirrored databases come online, they will have to go under these three recovery phases. Whenever a failover occurs, during automatic failover occurs, or when you do a manual failover, uh, if your databases are configured under always on availability group, right, at that time also all databases hosted on secondary will have to go under these three recovery phases. Any question here, any doubt?
Neeraj, one question. So when the redo is performing, when database will come online, so undo when it's going to done, so still it holds the active transactions. Hello, can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me, anybody?
Yeah,
Yes,
we
yes,
can
I'm
hear
able to
you.
hear you.
Yes, are you there? I think he's speaking on mute.
Hello, am I audible?
Yeah, yes, you are audible now.
So I was lost for some time. There was some network problem. Yes, tell me now.
Yeah, when the SQL Server restarts, there are three phases in DB. When the DB is coming online, before coming online, there are three phases performing, right? So redo, it shows that it roll forward phase. When this phase completes, database will come online. But when
Yes.
we come from the undo phase,
Mm.
so in undo hold active transactions, right? Which is not committed. Is that
Yes, that is correct.
okay? Okay.
So
So all
those
committed ones,
transactions,
yeah, all
those transactions will be rolled back, right? When rollback process will complete, actually, there are chances, and maximum chances that you will have both kind of transactions. Some transactions may be in the committed state, and their resultant data has not yet been hardened to the data file on disk, and some transactions may be in active state. So actually, during the recovery phase, you will see both operations are happening, right?
Yeah, in
Redo
error log,
and
we can see these three
yes,
phases
yes,
actually.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So
You can.
redo phase, whichever committed and after checkpoint, it will roll forward to become the online. And undo phase
Yes.
also, it will hold some active transactions. Then whenever the next checkpoint will occur, that undo, it will goes to the data file. Is that?
No, no, it will not go to the data file. That transaction will be completely rolled back. That will be undone,
So
right?
again, when it goes to the MDF file.
No, no, it will not be written to the MDF file. That transaction has to be rolled back. Roll back. What happens when you kill a transaction? Actually, the rollback process happens, right? It means that whatever that transaction has done, right? Whatever pages that are modified in the page, that has to be undone, right?
Okay.
So that data will be not written into the data file.
Okay. So just my slight confusion is undo hold the active transactions which is not committed. So next any
Yes.
checkpoint will occur, that uncommitted
Mm.
becomes as a committed, then it will go to the log file and dirty pages it will go to the MDF file.
Yes.
Okay.
No, no. In the data file, it was already there. In the log file, it is already there,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
In, SQL Server reads only information from the log file when it restarts. That's why the reason behind is that SQL Server follows a protocol that is known as WAL. This is a
Yeah.
very
Right ahead
important
log.
question.
Yeah.
Yes, asked in interviews, especially if you go for interview in TCS. They will ask this question,
Yeah. Right.
right? What is WAL protocol? That is the favorite question there. Okay.
Okay, Neeraj.
So WAL protocol is different from write ahead logging, or is it same?
No, that is same. WAL, right? WAL, WAL, right?
So
E for
so
ahead, L for logging, right ahead logging.
so in one word, what is the best answer we can give it to the interviewer? Like, what? Tell me about write ahead logging.
Right ahead logging, you can say right ahead logging is a protocol, is a technology that is implemented in SQL Server, which enforces SQL Server to write any transaction in in transaction log file first before it starts executing. Right?
Okay.
That is what it says, right ahead logging. Okay. So let us come back now after discussing these things. Although there were not many steps related to performance tuning, but I discussed this log architecture. Now I'll come back to the topic, what I was talking, where I left that. So in the last class, we talked about ACID properties, right? Wonderfully, we discussed that, what do they mean and how they are implemented into SQL Server. So you go through the recording, you will have clear concept there. While I was talking about different kinds of logs, I told you that transactions need to acquire log on the resource on which they have to perform operations. Your operation are basically two kinds in nature, two types in nature. A transaction may be read in nature, or a transaction may be write in nature. You have only one statement in T-SQL, that is select, that reads the data from a resource. When I say resource, your resource could be a row, your resource could be a range of rows, your resource could be a page or multiple pages, your resource could be an extent, and finally on the top level resource could be a table. But if you talk more, your resource on the higher level could be then your schema followed by the database, right? So whenever you establish a connection, whenever you connect to a SQL Server, basically you have a default database, you connect to that database. The moment you connect to that database, a shared lock is, occupied against your session, by your session against the database. That's why when you try to drop a database, and if any connection is established with that database, you will be not allowed to drop that database. So that's why in production environment or in any environment where multiple users are working with databases, what you do before dropping the database, you put the database deliberately into single user mode and then you drop that. So whenever you establish a connection, uh, a shared lock is occupied against the database. That is due to the security or safety of the database, so no one can drop the database accidentally if any user is using that. Now, depending upon the nature of the transaction, right, locks may be acquired on any level on the database. That level may be row, that level may be your page or pageage. That level may be your extent or the table, right? Let's try to understand that. These are what I'm going to talk is known as lock granularities. So log granularity is implemented log granularity is implemented in SQL Server to improve the concurrency of concurrent transactions, right? What does it mean? Let us try to understand through examples. If I have a transaction and I execute that transaction, say for example, it is against a table, right, which has many rows. And when I will execute that transaction, so what level of lock will be acquired, right? Lock granularity and lock types are different things. You have basically three kinds of locks: shared lock, update lock, and exclusive lock. And under lock granularity, although you see a few things, even I'm not clear with this metadata, what does it means, allocation unit. So we are not going to talk about that. We will talk about row level granularity, then key level granularity, page level granularity, and then table level granularity. These are the things we will see. So why it is important to understand, we call SQL Server Lock Manager implements one technique that is known as lock escalation. The objective of lock escalation is to reduce the number of locks against a resource that a transaction wants. For example, if I'm trying to update 1,000 rows in a table and there are, say, 1 lakh rows in that table, and I'm trying to update 1,000 of rows in that table, it is obvious that those 1,000 rows will not fit in most of the cases on a single page. Those 1,000 rows will be part of multiple pages, right? So if SQL Server occupies 1,000 row level locks, it means that it needs to provide 1,000 locks, for that transaction against those 1,000 rows. Every lock is a memory object and it occupies 64 KB in memory. So it's wastage of memory, right? And it's an overhead on the lock manager too, to maintain it. So once the operation is finished, then it also has to release those locks from the 1,000 of rows, right? So say, for example, let us make it more clear. I have, suppose 10,000 rows in a table, and those 10,000 rows fit in, say, 50 data pages. It means that on each of the page, we have 200 rows, right? Now, you are updating some rows in the table, and in one page we have 200 rows, right? So you have written such an update command that is trying to update, say, 110 rows on a page, right? So one way is to have 110 locks on those 110 rows. Another way is to occupy a page level lock itself. So here what you see, when this is the process of lock escalation. Instead of taking 110 locks on 110 rows, what SQL Server do, SQL Server will see that more than 50% of rows are going to be updated on this table. So why not escalate these row level locks, 110 row level locks, to a page level lock? So in this case, 100, instead of occupying 110 row level locks, a single page level lock has to be occupied. So 64 multiplied by 110, whatsoever value will be there, right? That much KB of memory space will be reduced only to 64 KB. For single page, only one page level lock is required to be occupied. That's why lock escalation is a very important process in SQL Server, and that happens internally by the lock manager. You can have some control on that if you define the priority, but I'm not going to talk about that. That is completely DVA stuff. I'm not talking about. If you are interested, then you can also read Microsoft, articles that how to control the escalation process of lockings in SQL Server. Lowest level lock that you have in SQL Server. So far granularity is concerned, lowest level log granularity is row level granularity, that is represented by the RID, that is represented by RID in one of the DMV that is known as DM translock locks, something like that. You see here, what is that? Yes, DM translocks. This is the DMV that we use to find the information that what kind of locks have been occupied or implemented against a resource, right, by the transaction. So we will see that. So let us not talk much theory now. Let us see this in action. Let us create a table and insert few rows there. If this table exists, that will be dropped. If not, then let us create it. Create a table with only single column, C1 int of type, and insert one value there. I have inserted. And then we are trying to just delete this. But before doing so, this is a complete transaction from where the begin tran starts. Begin tran starts from here. So this is a complete transaction. What we will do, you see here, we are deleting records from the test1 table that we have created, which has only one record that we have inserted, and the value is 1. So of course, it meets the condition. So one row has to be deleted, and by this transaction, delete transaction, you can say. So against that row, a row level lock will be occupied, right, by this transaction on that row. and that will be captured, right, under this DM translocks DMV. So you will have to replace here your request session ID equals to SPID. What is the SPID here? The SPID is 52. You can see we are executing this transaction under 62 session ID. So let us replace it. And then we are capturing a few information. We are basically interested to capture request session ID, resource database ID, database ID for AdventureWorks. I don't know what is that. Let us check that. So we can check it, sp underscore help DB. And let us see what is maybe 5. AdventureWorks 5. Database ID is 5. So we are capturing the database ID. Resource associated in TTID, we are capturing resource type, resource description, request mode, request status. More interesting is that we have to check for resource type, right? And request mode, what kind of lock has been granted, right, against what kind of resource. So under resource type column, you will see RID, and under request mode, you will see shared and shared in intention. Let us execute this complete transaction now to check that how locks are acquired. Execute it. Nothing it's showing. Why?
Anirudh, you are on mute.
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. So now you see that against session ID 52, multiple information we have. First resource type, we have the database, right? As I told that whenever you establish a connection with a database through a session, a shared lock is granted against that database to the session. So that's why you see here the request mode was shared and it was granted. The next is, let us not talk about this object. Let us talk about this RID, right? So your object represents your table, right? That a intent exclusive lock was requested by this session for doing the delete operation against the table. Actually, we are deleting one row, but that row is a part of your table. So that table is represented as object here, and it was intent exclusive. So whenever a transaction has to perform any operation, first of all, it sends its extent. It sends its intent to perform a particular kind of operation. So the transaction requested intent for an exclusive lock in order to perform the right operation, which is delete in this case. And it is saying that it was granted. Next, that is very interesting. That is what I want to tell you is the RID lock, right? We are performing delete on a single row, and still I don't have any index created on this table. That's why an exclusive lock was requested to perform the delete operation against that row, and that is represented here as RID as the resource, and the lock is here exclusive since we have to perform delete operation, right, by this transaction. So that is granted, and this row is part of this page, right? So in order to perform the delete operation, and intent to exclusive lock was also requested by this session against the page where on which we have this row, right? So here you can see that this is my RID and this is my page. So many kind of locks are requested and granted, requested by the transaction and granted by the lock manager in order to perform this operation. Although we have rollback, right, still these locks have been requested and granted, and finally the transaction was rolled back. The delete operation was not in effect. Even we commit it, still we have these all kinds of locks, right? But if I execute it now, simply this part, if you execute only simply this part, you will see there is no lock now occupied against the row, the object, and the page resource type. Rather, only you will see only one shared lock is there, right? So you see here, one shared lock is there against the database because still we have connection established against this database. But again, if you perform this transaction, right, from here as the transaction, delete transaction is here. So again, these locks will be requested and granted here. So RID, since we are deleting a single row, that's why you see finally a RID lock is acquired. So objective here is to tell you that using the DM translock DMV, right, you can see what kind of locks have been acquired by a transaction which you are executing under a particular session. So in this way, you can check. RID lock is not a good thing. When you see RID lock, it means that your table does not have indexes, right? So you try to eliminate this RID lock. And this RID lock must be converted into key lock when you implement an index, whether it is clustered index or whether it is non-clustered index. This RID lock will be converted into key lock. So any question here? No question. So let us now create a cluster index and or non-cluster index on this table, and then let us see that how RID lock is going to be converted into key lock. So simply we are creating a cluster index on the C1 column of test1 table that we have created. That cluster index is created. Now let us check it again. So begin tron and include this DMV here, execute it. Now you see here the RID lock is changed with key lock. When you create a cluster index or non-cluster index, right, the lock is rather taken on your index, not on your row. One thing we didn't check. Okay, leave that. So these are the different kinds of resources you have, right? Let me check if I can show you more. So you see, you saw the case of row level lock and key level lock, right? So row level lock and key level lock provides very high concurrency because they lock only those rows, right, which are required in the operation. So say for example, if I have 200 rows on a on every page of my table, right, and I'm updating or deleting say 50 rows, right, and 50, if 50 row level lock or key level lock have been occupied by the transaction, right, on that page, so still 150 rows are free uh, for any kind of operations. You know that there is a philosophy that I discussed that writers block writers. Your delete, update, and insert operations are writers, right? So only those 50 rows of the page are exclusively locked for the write operation. Remaining 150 are free for read or write operations, right? It means that the page is not completely locked. So other writers will be allowed to perform write operations against 150 remaining 150 rows, right? It means that we are allowing more transaction concurrency here, but at the same time, you know, uh, we are unnecessary. I would not say unnecessary. We are, consuming more memory also because we are going to lock. We are going to use 50 locks against 50 rows. So it's all depends upon lock manager that how it will escalate the locks, how it will escalate the locks from row level lock or key level lock to page level lock, how it will escalate page level locks to extent locks, or how it will escalate extent locks to table level lock. It all depends upon the lock manager. You don't have control, right? So page level locks are acquired uh, by your transaction with the help of lock manager only when more than half of the row of a page has to be locked, and that is internally detected by the lock manager. And in that case, RID or key level locks are escalated by the lock manager itself to the page level lock. Likewise, if if you are performing such a transaction which is going to acquire a lot of page level locks, right, and which page level locks are more than uh, you know the half number of the pages which is allocated to a table, right, then in that case what will happen, uh, lock manager will automatically escalate those page level locks to table level lock, right? When you perform any alter rebuild kind of index rebuild kind of operation, in that case actually extent level lock is occupied on the table. The objective is here to minimize the locking. That is the to minimize the locks, because every lock is a 64 KB object. And when you minimize the lock, you are going to save your memory. That's why lock escalation process is there in SQL Server. And, it lock escalation process helps, SQL Server database engine to use the memory optimally, not minimally. not utilize the memory by locks. It max, but optimally it should use the memory. That's why internally lock escalation process is there. So this is all about the locking, right? Database locking I already have discussed. This is all about the log granularity and different kinds of log granularity. You can check through that DMV that I have talked about. If you have any question here, feel free to ask, right? Perhaps I already have shared these documents with all of you. You go through that. I would encourage you, and you come up with more questions in the next class if you don't have any question right now. So tomorrow we will have the class. You can come up with your questions.
Okay, Neeraj.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Neeraj. Neeraj, can I ping you around 4:30, right?
4:30, yes. You give me a ping at 4:30.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, guys.
Thank you, Neeraj.
Thanks for your time today. We'll see you tomorrow then. Bye.